Arizona, nestled between the whispering pines and the fog-shrouded mountains, stood an old Victorian mansion known as Ravenwood Manor. Its creaking floors and dusty rooms had remained uninhabited for years, ever since the tragic demise of its last owner, Miss Eliza Wynthrope, a lady of great beauty and sorrow, who had vanished one stormy night in her infamous red dress, never to be seen again. The story of Eliza's red dress was well known among the townsfolk. It was said to be cursed, with every woman who wore it meeting a fate most grim. Despite this, Julia Sanders, a budding writer with a penchant for the supernatural, decided to move into Ravenwood Manor, hoping the isolation would inspire her next horror novel. Upon her arrival, the manor felt unnervingly welcoming. The grand hallway boasted portraits that seemed to watch her every move, especially that of Eliza, whose piercing eyes and crimson dress sent shivers down Julia's spine. As night fell on her first evening, the wind howled like the cries of a banshee, and Julia discovered an old chest in the attic. Inside, carefully preserved, lay the red dress. The silk whispered promises of untold stories, and overcome by a surge of inspiration, Julia couldn't resist. She tried on the dress, and as the fabric clung to her, a cold chill swept through the attic. That night, Julia dreamt of Eliza, wandering through the manor's endless corridors, calling out to someone, her voice echoing with a melancholic yearning. Each dream grew more vivid than the last, blurring the lines between sleep and wakefulness. Julia began to write fervently, her pen driven by a force she couldn't understand, filling pages with tales of love, betrayal, and revenge. Days turned into weeks, and the more Julia wrote, the more she felt Eliza's presence enveloping her, guiding her hand, whispering in her ear. Her reflections in the mirror began to change subtly. Her hair darkened, her eyes seemed deeper, and every reflection showed her in the red dress, even when she wasn't wearing it. Concerned, Julia decided to visit the local library to research Eliza's history. She learned that Eliza was suspected of poisoning her unfaithful husband on the night of her disappearance. The townspeople had believed that her spirit could never rest, and so had cursed the dress to trap her soul within its threads. Armed with this knowledge, Julia returned to the manor, determined to confront the ghost. That night she wore the dress, and as the clock struck midnight, Eliza appeared before her, not as a reflection, but as a specter in flesh and blood. Her eyes were hollow with eternal grief, her hands reaching out to Julia. "You must help me find peace." Eliza's voice was a sorrowful whisper. "Free me, so we both may live." Realizing that Eliza's spirit was bound to the dress, Julia tore the fabric from her body and set it ablaze in the fireplace. As the flames consumed the cursed silk, Eliza's spirit began to scream and contort, a storm of supernatural force swirling around the room. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it all ceased. The dress was reduced to ashes, and Eliza's ghost was gone. In the aftermath, the manor felt lighter, as if a heavy veil had been lifted. Julia continued to write, her stories now filled with hope and renewal rather than darkness and despair. But sometimes, in the dead of night, she swore she could hear the faint rustle of silk and the soft, sad sigh of a woman trapped no longer.